Hello, Euro friends. I thought since we're meeting in Athens, under various conditions, some electronic, some other, I'll talk to you about the ancient Olympics. Now, I have a very personal connection to the ancient Olympics that I'm going to talk to you about. And also, it's interesting that two women were double Olympic champions, official ones, even though only men competed. So that requires a bit of explanation. I'm going to talk to you about analyzing Olympic events, superstars, technology, techniques, training, and the women's competition in ancient Greece. The ancient Olympics were held from 776 BC to 393 AD, over about 1,000 years. We have winners recorded till 277. Starting in 576, over every 4 years, there are actually 4 stadia. In year 1, the Olympic Games would happen, and they were by far the best documented. Year 2, the Nemean Games and Isthmian Games both. Year 3, the Pythian Games at Delphi. Year 4, the Nemean Games and Isthmian Games again, giving us 6 competitions over 4 years. They were referred to as a Pan-Hellenic crown, Stephanitic or Stefani tie, a crown being a Stefani. In my trip to Olympia, I decided the stadium really needed beer and souvenir tents. Here's one start-finish line, 600 feet away is another one. The stone lines are carved. Here's a close-up. These squares held posts to separate up to 22 runners. These grooves were for the runner's feet. I just had to get in one myself. Now, with 22 runners, as many as 22 could run at one time for a one-length race, so just under 200 meters. But to run more than one length, they would have 11 runners or less. Each runner would run down to the other end, circle around a post, come back here, circle around this post, and form a very tight oval, which is why the 1896 Panathenaic Stadium simulated that very tight oval, this beautiful marble stadium. And there's a post here and here to simulate the post the runners ran around in the ancient games. If you go to Panathenaic, be sure to go down this tunnel. There is a great Olympic museum there. Let's talk about a very interesting gentleman that has a connection to me, Phalos of Croton. He won twice at Delphi in the pentathlon, once in the Delos. An epigram says he long jumped 5 plus 50 feet, 55 feet, through the discus 100 minus 5, 95 feet. These are the only 2 measurements we have from ancient Greece. It suggests that measurements were taken from 100 feet markers or less, plus or minus. Now I have to explain, how do you jump 55 feet? We'll talk about that shortly. He made so much money, he owned a battleship and he fought for Alexander the Great at Salamis. Alexander sent all his ludi to Phalos in Croton from his next battle, showing it's good business to win a war, but showing everybody around Croton how important it was to win. Phalos's Croton was not in Greece. It was a Greek city in southern Italy. There were many athletes from Croton who won a wreath. The wreath was called a Stefani in Greek, in Latin letters Stefani, my family name. They would get that for winning any event. Thanks to Phalos and them, anything that happened important in Italy earned a person a Stefani, a wreath. Through the Middle Ages, scholars in Bologna were given a Stefani. My family name, Stefani or Stefani, started in Bologna in 1350. My grandfather was born southwest of Bologna. Just to be clear, he was not born in 1350. I may have friends that think he was probably born then, but it wasn't back that long ago. My point is, without Phalos and the term Stefani, who knows, my name could have been Mussolini. Well, the foundation of Hellenic culture translated and listed the winners of the ancient games from 776 to 277 AD. The best place to find them is on Wikipedia, where they copied all those winners. Look for list of ancient Olympic victors. Again, list of ancient Olympic victors. I sorted out the events in victor and winners. There were 5 sports and 30 events, but 8 of them were only held once. So it was a very tight competition with no more than 22 events in most Olympics. There are 861 unambiguous results. The most popular of the ancient Olympic contestants was in athletics. The great 49% of all competition was in that one sport. 1/3 of all competition was in one event, the one-length stadion, which was just under 200 meters. There was a stadion for boys, a 2-length dialis, just under 400 meters, a dialis in armor, a longer dalicus, roughly 1,500 meters to 5K, a pentathlon where it was elimination with a stadion, then a discus, then javelin, then long jump, and whoever is less wrestled for the championship, and a pentathlon for boys. That was 49%. 32% of the competition was in the combat events, boxing for men and boys, pankration for men and boys, and wrestling for men and boys. So far, we've accounted for 81%. 11%, bringing us to 92, was in 10 chariot races, but something strange is happening. There was a 10-horse chariot race and a foals race only happening once in 65 AD, and another thing called chariot race only twice in 65 AD. There were an event for 2 mules, horses, foals, or a chariot race for 2 horses and so on, of 7 kilometers called a cinerus for 4 horses, foals, or colts, 14 kilometers called a tethrippin. There were 3 equestrian events comprising 4 of the other 8%, a foals race, a horse race, and a mare's race. The remaining 4% were artistic performances, the herald competition and the trumpeter competition. Were very practical because there were no loudspeakers. So somebody had to yell information very clearly and understandably, or use a trumpet to tell people what to do. And the trumpet was used in warfare. Oddly enough, there was a lyre playing event and a tragedy competition only once, 65 AD again. The herald competition had stopped, and in 65 AD, it started again. Kind of odd, we have 6 odd things in 65 AD. Well, that was because of Nero. In 65 AD, he won all 6 of those. There is a saying that Nero fiddled while Rome burned. No, to be accurate, he played the lyre. Well, he fancied himself as a musician and an actor. I don't think anybody was going to disagree with him, and they made sure they kept him happy by giving him 6 Stefanis. Also, King Philip of Macedon was a triple winner in a horse race in the tethrippin and cinerus chariot races. I'm going to add one because I'll bet his son was there to cheer him on. I'm going to add conquering the known world, and I'll give the championship to Philip's son, Alexander the Great. Well, there were only 3 that had more wins than Nero, and obviously Nero's wins were contrived. I consider the greatest Olympian of all time, Leonidas of Rhodes, the Carl Lewis, so to speak, of athletics. He won 12 times. He competed in the 3 most popular events to win, the stadion, the dialis, and the dialis in armor, all 3 of them, which he won 4 times consecutively, starting in 164 BC. He won all 12 of those. That's over a 12-year period. Can you imagine remaining on top of the world? Everybody wanted to defeat him, I'm sure. And they didn't. He won all 12 times. He must have amazing starts, amazing training. I consider him the greatest of all time. Herodotus of Megara won 9 consecutive times in one event, the trumpeters competition, that gave him a 32-year span of winning, starting in 328 BC. Each time he won, I'm sure they expected more out of him, but he kept winning. He must have had an amazing and enduring sound to have won so many times. The third one winning more than Nero was Aeschylus of Croton with 7 wins, 3 in the Stadion, 3 in the Delos, and 1 in the Delos in armor from 480 BC. He again had superlative skills. Those 3 won 12, 9, and 7, but having 12 wins 4 consecutive times, that is amazing. Now, 6, there are only 4 won as many as Nero, but they won honestly. Keonis of Sparta in the Delos, Eposthenes of Sparta in men's and boys wrestling, Milon of Croton in boys wrestling and men's wrestling, and Hermogenes of Chanthus in the Stadion, the Delos, and the Delos with armor. Those were our superstars. Another interesting person that won many places was Sostratos of Sicyon. They called him Mr. Fingertips. He won the Pancration, no holds barred. That's kind of like the mixed martial arts. 3 times in a row at Olympia. He won the Isthmian and Nemean games 12 times, the Pythian games twice. 17 wins in the Pancration. How did he do it? He found a technique to break his opponent's fingertips. Big ouch. They must not have shaken hands with him afterwards. I think that would have been rather dangerous. All right, let's talk about nutrition. They ate large amounts of meat. Okay, they needed animal protein. They kind of understood that. They didn't know much about carbohydrates and fruit, but they got that right. They ate heart. Well, they had an understanding of oxygen transfer, but eating heart wasn't going to give it to them. They had to try aerobic and anaerobic training. They didn't know that much about it, so they thought eating heart would work. But their other exercises worked out. They ate animal testicles, ugh. They kind of understood hormones. I give them a nice try for that. They didn't know about steroids. They could have taken steroids. There was nothing illegal about drugs in ancient Greece. Well, let's talk about training. Many of them used weights called halteres, between 1.5 and 2 kilograms as the exercise. Weightlifters used heavier weights. I cannot imagine this, but Buban lifted a 143 kilogram stone and he threw it. Boxers shadow boxed with a bag, pancration with a heavier bag. The result of that is runners had muscular legs, but thin upper bodies. They didn't exercise them. Fighters had thick upper bodies, but skinny legs. Galen, the father of medicine, said they should have had exercises more balanced. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with Galen. Let's talk about psychology. Well, performance-enhancing drugs were not illegal, only bribery. They took opium juice, they took hallucinogens. We know that chariot drivers took strychnine as a stimulant. Now, just a little bit or they died. But you know what? Using strychnine did not end in the ancient world. Thomas Hicks took brandy and strychnine, and he won the Olympic marathon in 1904. He was stoned out of his mind. He was so far ahead, it didn't matter. He needed an escort across the finish line. There he is, stoned out of his mind. He almost died. Technology. They needed starting gauge for running, starting gauge for the chariot race. They long jumped with weights, and they had a way to spin, stabilize the javelin. They had incredible levels of technology. For running, they would crank a post up, which was fastened to a twisted rope on one end and fasten it with the other end. They would fasten these. Between them were ropes, and in this simulation, it would hold back the athletes. They would drop a rope, pull a rope that released the posts. The posts would fall forward, outside first. The outside runners would get a head start, a little bit, but you could draw for any lane, so equalized. At the hippodrome, the chariot and horse races were such that the outer and inner lanes were the worst. The inner lane, you had to go slowly to twist around. The outer lane, you had to go further. The middle lane was the best. An incredibly clever way to start the chariot races. The race was headed to the right. The chariots were lined up this way in pairs, each pair constrained by a rope. The ropes were connected to a dolphin-shaped lever. Each time they pulled one lever down, they released a pair of chariots. When they released the first pair, they waited till that got next. That pair was running next to pair number 2. Then they released pair number 2. By the time pair 2 was running, pair 1 had a head start. When the second pair reached the third, they would release this chariot. By the time this chariot started running, the second one was here, the first one was here. By the time the last chariots were released, those nearer to the rail were further forward with a greater head start. Those farther from the rail were further forward with a greater head start. And the one in the middle had the least head start, exactly compensating for the outer and inner lanes being worse. Amazing engineering. The long jump, they used weights, halteras. So the question is, if you ran, they'd slow you down so that we're sure they were two-footed standing long jumps. Here was the technology we reinvented. If you lean forward with the weights behind, your center of gravity was farther forward than it would have been. You then push the weight forward and leap forward. Your center of gravity is farther than it would have been had you not had the weights. Then you brought your legs forward, weights forward, and landed again a bit farther than you would have been had you not had the weights. This is from a contemporary Voss. This is a reenactment. Now, if this was me long jumping with weights and my coach was whacking me to improve my technique, I would have taken my weights and dropped them on his foot and changed his technique. But that's just my approach. Now, regarding those long jumps with the weights, researchers showed that with a 2-kilogram weight and the technology I showed you, you could gain 5%. 8% was the optimal value, but 2 kilograms, you could gain 5%. Remember, Phalis of Croton jumped 55 feet, 16.3 meters, out jumping the pit. How do you jump 55 feet? Historians are convinced he made 5 two-footed jumps, 5 for pentathlon, which was 5 events, and therefore he used 5 two-footed jumps. Catholic University Leuven, Belgium, showed that after 8 weeks of training, their jumpers reached 15 meters with 5 two-footed jumps using the technology I showed. That pretty well shows that 5 two-footed jumps with weights using this technology could have done it and almost did do it in reenactment. Now, for this javelin, a cord was wrapped around the javelin and a loop around the fingers. So as you threw that javelin, the cord unraveled and the javelin was spin stabilized. Something about this picture and having this sharp object near an important body part is bothersome. But anyway, I'm sure they were careful. All right, I want you to remember this hand position. They used either 1 or 2 fingers headed through the loops. Well, I went to the National Archaeological Museum and it was said that this was Zeus throwing a thunderbolt or Poseidon throwing a trident. But look at his hand. Here's a close-up I took. See the finger position? Either the sculptor used a model who was a javelin thrower, or maybe that was actually Phalis, because there is a statue of Phalis up on the Acropolis. So that could very well be Phalis, not Zeus or Poseidon. I suggested that to the National Archaeological Museum. They didn't answer back, so I guess they like Zeus and Poseidon. Let's talk about women at Olympia. The games are dedicated to Zeus. Therefore, men competed, unmarried women attended, and that probably made for some uncomfortable conversations considering the men competed naked. But anyway, unmarried women could and did attend. The high priestess of Demeter was an official. Married women were not to attend, but a married woman was double Olympic champion officially. Kyniska of Sparta trained the winning horses in the Tethrypin twice. Now, if the owner of the horses paid someone else to either be the chariot driver or the jockey, that person, by receiving money, was ineligible for the championship. Therefore, the owner of the horses received the Stefani wreath. That she had enough money, she realized that was a way to win. She bought some horses, trained the rider, the chariot driver, and it won in 396 BC. And again, 4 years later, she had to get a wreath outside of the stadium for having been, because she was married. But Belestiche of Macedonia did the same thing a little over 100 years later. And it's believed maybe 10 more did that, but we know about these two women winning in the men's competition. More power to them for figuring that out. Calipatera trained her son in the stadium, inside the stadium. When she was outed, she was pardoned. Her father, 3 brothers, and a son were champions. So she was pardoned. Trainers had to train naked after that, eliminated that possibility. Now, at the games, a second set of games were dedicated to Hera, Zeus's mythological wife. Unmarried women competed in 3 age groups in running over 400. They reduced the distance from 600 feet to 500, meaning it was 83% as fast. My work in 1928 showed that when women returned to athletics at the Olympics, the female champions, in fact, were 83% as good as the male champions. In all the athletic events, women are now 87% as good in all of them, 90% as good in running. They ran the stadion at 160 meters about. The deal is twice that, the Hippias 4 times that, the Dalek is roughly 3 to 4K. Married women were trainers, judges, and officials at the women's games at Olympia. The Greek government empowered a council of 16 women to officially handle the women's competition. In today's Olympics, the torch is lit at Hera's shrine. So women have received a symbolic equality in that gesture. Thank you from Stefani, and the best to everybody in Athens. If we were all there, I'd take you out for my favorite Greek beer. It's easy to remember the name of my favorite Greek beer. It is Alpha. All the best to you.